So Karl Marx, more like Moral Karks. You know, Moral Karks, he wrote some incredible stuff, right? Karl Marx, he wrote some really good stuff. He wrote the Communist Manifesto. He's the one that started the 1848 revolutions. In fact, communism and capitalism are the two leading economic theories of the world today. Communism, capitalism, and a synthesis between the two is the specter. Okay, so he starts out the manifesto of the Communist Party. This is the Communist Manifesto. A specter is haunting Europe. The specter of communism. And the specter of communism has been haunting America ever since communism came into existence. All the powers of old Europe have entered into a holy alliance to exorcise this specter. Pope and Tsar, Metternich and Guizot, French radicals and German police spies. Where is the party in opposition that has not been decried as communistic by its opponents in power? Where is the opposition that has not hurled back the brand and reproach of communism against the more advanced opposition parties, as well as against its reactionary adversaries? Two things result from this fact. Number one, communism is already acknowledged by all European powers to be itself a power. And number two, it is high time that communists should openly, in the face of the whole world, publish their views, their aims, their tendencies, and meet this nursery tale of the specter of communism with the manifesto of the party itself. To this end, communists of various nationalities have assembled in London and sketched the following manifesto to be published in the English, French, German, Italian, Flemish, and Danish languages. Chapter 1, Bourgeois and the Proletarians. The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. So, Karl Marx, you know, this is fantastic stuff. I heard it took 6 weeks to write this up. So 6 weeks he writes this up, and then boom, 50 revolutions in Americas, in Europe, revolutions all over the place. But the 1848 revolutions are going to fail. They're going to fail abysmally. You're only going to get the Swedish, the Swiss. Switzerland is going to get a constitution, and then Hungary. I want to say Hungary got some, there's something progressive good happening in Hungary, but for the most part in France and Germany and Brazil, they all had failed. So everybody's like, yeah, communist revolution, and then it failed. Okay, so, but these are exciting words. And then in this chapter 1, Bourgeois and the Proletarians, Karl Marx is going to talk about the history. The history is actually very, very rich of the world, of human history. Here's how human history is. Now it's the bourgeoisie and the proletarians. So we'll get to that in a second. Now, Karl Marx, you know, this is exciting when it comes to Karl Marx. He's basically saying there's the slaves and the slave masters, the oppressed and the oppressors. And the oppressed have to get free, and we're all in this together. You know, let's sing Kumbaya, come one, come all. We're all for one, one for all. That's what my main take from communism is we're all in this thing together. And whether we are all in this, whether or not you acknowledge it. But I don't need Karl Marx to be a socialist. I don't need Karl Marx to be a lefty. I could be a socialist. I'm a socialist anarchist, meaning I have a perfect blend of conservative and liberal ideas. So you have conservatives who's the brain and liberals who's the heart. So if you've been against communism, like America has been terrified of the specter of communism, you know, her entire life, in spite of the public libraries, public schools, public roads, in spite of the Social Security. Talk about socialism. Social Security. You can't get more socialism. That's social. I guess that's what, the state socialism. So it's not socialism because socialism eradicates the state, but it is state socialism. And it was started by Otto von Bismarck, who was actually opposed to socialism. But Karl Marx, while he has some great words, he also has some really terrible words. He's got some really awful words. While I am an atheist, anti-theist, there is no God, I am not Hitler. And so if the Jewish and the Christian and the whoever, the religious, I think your religion is stupid. And I get to mock your religion endlessly, but you get to peacefully live down the road in your synagogue or with your little hat. If you want to be a dumb religious person, then you can be a dumb religious person. That's your right as an American. So Karl Marx's anti-Semitism is fucking gross. It's fucking disgusting. Karl Marx's anti-Semitism makes me think, well, shit, maybe he is a Nazi. Maybe Adolf Hitler, we've been thinking he's right-wing fascist, but maybe Adolf Hitler, when it comes to the anti-Semitism of Karl Marx and Adolf Hitler, there is no distinction. There is no difference. So Karl Marx could have easily been goose-stepping in the Nazi ranks. It could have, easily. Karl Marx could have easily have been a Nazi. And then I thought National Socialist, Adolf Hitler only called himself a National Socialist because it was Orwellian. He was saying the opposite, just trying to get the, goodwill of being a National Socialist while being against socialism. So if you just measure Karl Marx in terms of his hatred of the Jewish people, he's as Nazi as you can get. And if Hitler's a National Socialist, well then hell, Karl Marx would have been right at home with the Nazi Party. So I guess Hitler would have been, a Marxist, and I guess Karl Marx would have been a Nazi. So let's read this, article, The Russian Loan, published in the New York Daily Tribune, January 4th, 1856. This is Karl Marx and his anti-Semitism. Thus, we find every tyrant backed by a Jew, as is every pope by a Jesuit. In truth, the cravings of oppressors would be hopeless, and the practicability of war out of the question if there were not an army of Jesuits to smother thought, and a handful of Jews to ransack pockets. The real work is done by the Jews and can only be done by them, as they monopolize the machinery of the loan-mongering mysteries by concentrating their energies upon the barter trade in securities here and there and everywhere, that a little capital courts investment. There is ever one of these little Jews ready to make a little suggestion or place a little bit of a loan. The smartest highwayman in the Abrazi is not better posted up about the local of the hard cash in a traveler's valise or pocket than those Jews about any loose capital in the hands of a trader. The language spoken smells strongly of Babel, and the perfume which otherwise pervades the place is by no means of a choice kind. Thus do these loans, which are a curse to the people, a ruin to the holders, and a danger to the governments, become a blessing to the houses of the children of Judah. This Jew organization of loan mongers is as dangerous to the people as the aristocratic organization of landowners. The fortunes amassed by these loan mongers are immense, but the wrongs and sufferings thus entailed on the people and the encouragement thus afforded to their oppressors still remain to be told. The fact that 1855 years ago Christ drove the Jewish money changers out of the temple, the money changers in the temple, they were Jewish, and that the money changers, I didn't know that, of our age enlisted on the side of tyranny happened again chiefly to be Jews, is perhaps no more than a historical coincidence. The loan-mongering Jews of Europe do only on a larger and more obnoxious scale what many others do on one smaller and less significant. But it is only because the Jews are so strong that it is timely and expedient to expose and stigmatize their organization. So that's 1856, huh? So the 1848 revolutions failed, so shit, I guess just go with anti-Semitism, right? 7 years later, January 4th, 1856, Karl Marx, this is an article called The Russian Loan. And you can see the anti-Semitism all over the place. So fuck off, Karl Marx. I can throw Karl Marx to the wayside, and I can be a good, strong socialist. And I think it's actually better and smarter to do something like that. 1848, you're going to use an 1848 philosopher, use his solutions and prescriptions for the 2000s as if our day and age has anything to do with their day and age. I'm sure there's some similarities, but there's a lot of differences too. So one good thing about Karl Marx, right, with the whole idea of, the idea of socialism and communism is out there. So in some sense, Karl Marx has won. Karl Marx's legacy is already intact. He doesn't need anybody, today to carry on with his Marxinism. A lot of people want to act like the more extreme or more, idealistic of a communist that they are, that somehow they're, better than others. But if you compare Karl Marx, who is, probably the most purest Marxist you could ever find, with Otto von Bismarck, who hated the socialist, Otto von Bismarck, he got us universal health care. He got us Social Security, old age pensions. He got us workers' compensation. So, Otto von Bismarck, a guy who hated socialism and socialist, is going to initiate state socialism, the welfare state. So there's workmen's compensation, accident insurance, sickness insurance, and the health care. The 1883 health care, the boss pays 1/3 of the health care insurance and the workers pay 2/3. And then they would punish the boss if they weren't paying for, if there was any uninsured people in there. It was actually easy to pass. Otto von Bismarck said it was easy to pass universal health care in Germany in 1883. So you got Karl Marx that's, trying to get the big communist revolution, fails, gets nobody nothing. 4 of his kids are going to starve to death, lack of health care, poverty. Poverty is going to kill 4 of his own kids. And whereas I could see why that would put a burning hatred in his heart for capitalists, so he's biased, right? As a man, he failed. You had 4 of your kids that died of starvation. They died of, lack of poverty, lack of health care. They died of poverty. They died of lack of health care. They starved to death. Now, I'm not going to, I'm sure back in those days, shit was tough. But my point being is that Karl Marx's legacy is he didn't get anybody old age insurance. Otto von Bismarck did. Karl Marx didn't get anybody universal health care. Otto von Bismarck did. And Karl Marx didn't get anybody workmen's compensation. Otto von Bismarck did. So Otto von Bismarck was a more effective socialist than Karl Marx was. It would make more sense for the modern day Marxists to worship Otto von Bismarck if you actually want to get tangible, real accomplishments. If you actually want, solutions to your problems, not just a bunch of rhetoric and a bunch of... Karl Marx is an author. Karl Marx wrote about history. And what he says about this historical, basically, what I'm about to read right here, this is very important. But because of the way he understands that history is, progress, we always keep going forward and we keep progressing, we keep getting better and better. His idea of progress is to destroy capitalism, but what if the solution isn't the destruction of capitalism, but it's the melding of the two, a synthesis of both, a mixed system, a system which has free market principles, but you also have Social Security and public, education and libraries and roads and sidewalks and whatnot. And so that's a mixture. That's a mixture of socialism and capitalism, is it not? America is a mixed capitalist, communistic nation, whether we admit to it or not. We hate, the culture hates communism and the idea of communism, but Eisenhower was a state socialist. So it's like to the Otto von Bismarck, his idea to fight off the socialists in Germany at the time was to just give the people money from the state. So in his mind, he said he didn't give a shit what you called it. You call it socialist or not, I don't give a goddamn. As long as you don't get the power, as long as you don't get the credit for it. So in order to stop socialism, he instituted, a little bit of socialism. Whereas Karl Marx, what did he do? He wrote a couple articles. He let his kids die of starvation. He wrote a couple articles. He inspired people. He inspired revolutions. But ultimately, not one person gets a pension. Not one person gets a Social Security check. Not one person gets health care or hospital care because of anything that Karl Marx did. If anything, Otto von Bismarck did that, against it. So I guess the threat, the specter of communism, forced Otto von Bismarck to institute his own sort of, Bismarckian socialism. But Karl Marx, there's no reason to deify any man. And Karl Marx, 1848, this is nearly 200 years in the future. Alright, so here's some good words of Karl Marx. The history of all hitherto existing society is a history of class struggles, freeman and slave, patrician and plebeian, lord and serf, guild master and journeyman, in a word, oppressor and oppressed, stood in constant opposition to one another, carried on an uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight. A fight that each time ended either in a revolutionary reconstitution of society at large or in the common ruin of the contending classes. In the earlier epochs of history, we find almost everywhere a complicated arrangement of society into various orders, a manifold gradation of social rank. In ancient Rome, we have patricians and knights, plebeians, slaves. In the Middle Ages, feudal lords, vassals, guild masters, journeymen, apprentices, and serfs. In almost all these classes, again, subordinate gradations. The modern bourgeois society that has sprouted from the ruins of feudal society has not done away with class antagonisms. It has but established new classes, new conditions of oppression, new forms of struggle in place of the old ones. Our epoch, the epoch of the bourgeoisie, possesses, however, this distinct feature. It has simplified class antagonisms. Society as a whole is more and more splitting up into two great hostile camps, into two great classes directly facing each other, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. From the serfs of the Middle Ages spring the chartered burghers of the earliest towns. From these burgesses, the first elements of the bourgeoisie were developed. The discovery of America, the rounding of the Cape, opened up fresh ground for the rising bourgeoisie. The East Indian and Chinese markets, the colonization of America, trade with the colonies, the increase in the means of exchange and in commodities generally gave to commerce, to navigation, to industry and impulse never before known, and thereby to the revolutionary element in the tottering feudal society, a rapid development. The feudal system of industry in which industrial production was monopolized by closed guilds now no longer sufficed for the growing wants of the new markets. The manufacturing system took its place. The guild masters were pushed on one side by the manufacturing class. Division of labor between the different corporate guilds vanished in the face of division of labor in each single workshop. Meantime, the markets kept ever growing, the demand ever rising. Even manufacture no longer sufficed. Thereupon steam and machinery revolutionized industrial production. The place of manufacture was taken by the giant modern industry. The place of the industrial middle class by industrial millionaires, the leaders of the whole industrial armies, the modern bourgeois. So the bourgeoisie are the industrial middle class, the industrial millionaires, the industrial middle class, leaders of entire industrial armies. That's your modern bourgeoisie. Essentially the rich versus the poor, right? Same story, rich versus the poor. Rich get richer, poor get poor. Only he's going to call the rich the bourgeoisie, and they're very particular and specific rich. Maybe his historical analysis is correct. Seems right. Seems very smart, whether it's right or not. And it does seem like there's a progression, right? Back in the days of the slaves, you want to go back to Roman society when there were slaves? There was patricians and knights and the plebeians. You were the plebes if you weren't the slaves. Go back to the Middle Ages when you were the serf, the apprentice, and the vassal, and the feudal lord. Okay, landlord, that's where landlord comes from, right? You don't own the land, you're just renting the space of what the landlord owns, the capitalist class. They're the ones that own everything. They own all the capital. And so when they hire you $10 an hour, really you're worth $100 an hour, and that's exploitation. Unless you don't have a backhoe and then you using their capital actually increases your productivity, then it's kind of a melding of the two, is it not? You kind of need the capital, you kind of need the labor, you sort of need both of them, right? Isn't that to maximize efficiency? So the modern bourgeoisie, this is the Industrial Revolution, your Carnegies and your J.P. Morgans and your Rockefellers, and then all their wage slaves, right, the cities that they created. Modern industry has established the world market for which the discovery of America paved the way. This market has given it up for America twice. Karl Marx mentioned America, the discovery of America, right, and then the colonization, he mentions that too. Then again, discovery of America paved the way. This world market was given an immense development to commerce, to navigation, to communication by land. This development has, in its turn, reacted on the extension of industry. And in proportion as industry, commerce, navigation, railways extended, in the same proportion the bourgeoisie developed, increased its capital, and pushed into the background every class handed down from the Middle Ages. We see, therefore, how the modern bourgeoisie is itself the product of a long course of development, of a series of revolutions in the modes of production and of exchange. Each step in the development of the bourgeoisie was accompanied by a corresponding political advance of that class, an oppressed class under the sway of the feudal nobility, an armed and self-governing association in the medieval commune. Here, independent urban republic, as in Italy and Germany. There, taxable third estate of the monarchy, as in France. Afterwards, in the period of manufacturing proper, serving either the semi-feudal or the absolute monarchy as a counterpoise against the nobility, and in fact, cornerstone of the great monarchies in general, the bourgeoisie has at last, since the establishment of modern industry and of the world market, conquered for itself in the modern representative state exclusive political sway. The executive of the modern state is but a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie historically has played a most revolutionary part. So, blah, 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 bourgeoisie, they're the enemy, fuck the bourgeoisie, right? That's where we're going with that. And so, I think that his understanding of the different epochs, right, you had Adam Smith. Adam Smith was a liberal in his time. In fact, that's what capitalism is called, is liberalism, neoliberalism. Milton Friedman considered him a liberal, and a classical liberal, because Adam Smith was opposed to mercantilism. So if you weren't a liberal capitalist, well, then you were still a mercantilist. You're going to go back to the old mercantilist days with the high tariffs and the protectionist. Mercantilism is actually commercialism, so it's actually very similar. It just means more trade, the better for society. And so I guess in a way, capitalism would be the next step, right? Your socialism is baby communism, and mercantilism is just baby capitalism. But my point is that during his time, Adam Smith was a liberal. Adam Smith called for change. Adam Smith says, let's not do this mercantilist bullshit. Let's do, free market economies, free market capitalism, baby. Let's do this. We're here. Let's do this. But today, Adam Smith would be considered a classical economist. He's the first economist. He's the old economist. He's the father of capitalism. He's the first person you read to get an understanding of capitalism, and then you build off of him. So he's very much a classical economist today, but, in 1776, he was the man. Now, let's see. We got a couple. Marx used the Bambergers to borrow money, so apparently he knew some Jewish folks, the Bambergers. He showed contempt for them. In a derogatory fashion, he referred to the father and son as Jew Bamberger and Little Jew Bamberger. Similarly, Spielman, whose name appears frequently in correspondence between Marx and Engels, was referred to as Jew Spielman. When on holiday in Ramsgate in 1879, Karl Marx reported to Engels that the resort contained many Jews and fleas. Oh, just a lot of Jews and fleas. Engels, Frederick Engels, Karl Marx, why are y'all talking so stupid like this? Professor Fine said something or another. So this is an article. But the another quote they get directly. And Karl Marx, he actually, published in 1844 an essay called On the Jewish Question. So, what's up with the Jewish question? You got a bunch of Jewish people out there. What are you going to do with them on the Jewish question? So, what truth is there in the argument? Marx's essay on the Jewish question, originally published in 1844, contains the following. What is the worldly religion of the Jew? Huckstering. What is his worldly god? Money. Money is the jealous god of Israel, in face of which no other god may exist. Money degrades all the gods of man and turns them into commodities. The bill of exchange is the real god of the Jew. His god is only an illusory bill of exchange. The chimerical nationality of the Jew is the nationality of the merchant, of the man, of money in general. So the whole, Jewish trope, the whole stereotype that Jewish people love money, if that's the case, then all Americans are a bunch of, Jewish people in that sense. They're the stereotypical Jews, whether they accept Judaism or not. The Christians, right? The Christians, they're probably some of the biggest lovers of money that are out here. You have to, in order to survive in America, you have to be you're a de facto capitalist. You're born in America, well then you have to be a capitalist or you're going to die. You're going to, some sink, some swim. You better understand that you live in a capitalist society because, there's going to be fucking hell, dog eat dog, and everybody being shit. Yeah. So, by default, every American is, born a capitalist. And whether you love money or not, you got to chase the almighty dollar. And by chasing the almighty dollar, does that make you not exactly what he just described, a huckster in? The money degrades the gods of man. The bill of exchange is the real god of the American. So this is, perhaps this is just a condemnation of greed, but he's putting it on the Jewish people. And like I said, there's no difference between what he says and what Adolf Hitler is saying. Fuck Hitler. Fuck Hitler. I'm not a Hitler, so I'm not going to hate the Jewish people. No, they're whatever. They're different, okay? They're different. And I got some jokes here about, like, what's up with the unleavened bread? I have nothing but respect for other people and nationalities and what have you. So, Jewish people you really love, you got a problem with yeast? Samson, he was a terrorist. Delilah should have cut his damn hair. If for the only reason because Samson thought he got his strength from his hair. That's crazy. Hey, Jewish folks, Samson did not get his strength from his hair. That's stupid. That is dumb. And gross. He never cut his hair. Did he ever wash his hair? Did he ever wash anything? I mean, where's the hygiene of... I bet Samson was a fucking dirty, stinky, smell like B.O. And the stupidest thing about Jewish folks is they believe an invisible man in the clouds is looking down upon them. There's an invisible man up in the clouds looking down on them, judging them, and you have to do everything for that invisible man up in the clouds or else, So, that's stupid, and that's really dumb, and that's really, but the Jews are God's chosen people. And one really great thing about the Jews is their kosher food. The Jews believe in kosher food. That animal that was raised by that, piece of crap farmer, he abused and tortured those animals? Well, that's not kosher. That means we're not going to eat that. We don't want none of the extra this and that, pesticides and chemicals and hormones and what the hell ever. So kosher food means you raise the animal, in a respectful way. You grain-fed it. You fed it only the natural stuff. Being kosher means you did shit right. So Karl Marx, he wasn't kosher in 1844 or 1856 or whatever. He was not kosher. Karl Marx needed to be kosher. Karl Marx needed to eat some kosher food. Karl Marx should have gave his children some kosher food. His kids are going to die of